Today's hearing is about the Judgment Fund, which was established by statute to pay court judgments and Justice Department compromise settlements of actual or imminent lawsuits against the government. Payment through the Judgment Fund is administered by the Judgment Fund branch, which is a part of the United States Department of the Treasury, Bureau of Fiscal Service. We've seen in recent years that the vast bureaucracy of the federal government can have the effect of obscuring the facts and circumstances of payments from the Judgment Fund. When the public seeks to scrutinize executive actions like the Iran settlement, the potential risk corridor settlement, or settlements under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, Congress is at the mercy of federal agencies to provide information. This dynamic exists because the Judgment Fund, as a permanent appropriation, requires no congressional action for payments to be made. Today's hearing was in part intended to gather information from federal officials about how the Judgment Fund is administered. We extended invitations to the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, and the United States Department of Treasury to testify on this topic. Neither produced witnesses. I'm particularly dismayed that given GAO's years of involvement on matters relating to the Judgment Fund, it's unable to voluntarily offer information to contribute to today's hearing. No reason was provided. I intend to follow up with GAO to ensure that this committee's questions are answered. Nevertheless, at this committee's request, the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of the Treasury, the Honorable Eric Thorson, submitted a letter addressing his office's recent inquiry into the Iran settlement, which I would like to submit for the record. And without objection, it is so ordered. The conclusion reached by the Inspector General, as well as the description of the materials that the Treasury Department officials relied upon in determining whether the Department of Justice's request for payment in this settlement should be approved, show that the Treasury Department's regulatory and manual-based requirements appear to set a low bar for approval of payment requests. For example, the approval of the Iran settlement claim relied in part on verbal notifications that the Judgment Fund's statutory requirements were met. That's according to Inspector General Thorson. Fiscal Service's Chief Counsel told us, and the Office of Inspector General, that the settlement agreement was not provided to Judgment Fund branch personnel due to its sensitive nature, and legally, the Judgment Fund branch is not required to review the settlement agreement. Fiscal Service's Chief Counsel told us, and a Judgment Fund branch employee confirmed, that the Chief Counsel verbally notified the Judgment Fund branch employee that the settlement agreement was final as authorization for the Judgment Fund to approve the payment. In other words, a verbal approval. Moreover, the Inspector General's letter reveals that the lack of publicly available precedent regarding approval of Judgment Fund requests makes it difficult for the public and Congress to understand the approval process. The Treasury Department does not issue decisions regarding Judgment Fund requests, which would document the agency's reasoning. To make matters worse, the documents that Treasury relied upon in making a decision aren't publicly available. Therefore, no recent body of precedent exists to assure Congress and the public that the Judgment Fund's use in any one case was proper. My hope is that the testimony from today's distinguished panel will inform the committee regarding the current state of the Judgment Fund, and that they will provide recommendations about what congressional actions are needed. Indeed, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the Constitution states, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time." Close quote. This provision, known as the Appropriations Clause, is the foundation of Congress's power of the purse. Today's hearing is about safeguarding that power. And as I have watched some of these cases come before the news and had difficulty in getting answers about the Judgment Fund, what goes into it, what comes out of it, and to whom and why, and asked some direct questions of some of the members of the previous administration, I'd just like to let this committee know that I'm determined to drill into the bottom of this. We have a congressional obligation to do oversight. We have a constitutional authority that we need to protect. And part of our job also is to restore our Article 1 authority, hopefully one day in its entirety. And so with that, I would conclude my opening statement, and